But it wasn't the traditional move to San Francisco where you go into high tech and you start building products for Google. It was actually to work at one of the most antiquated products in the world, which is liquor. One of the things she told me was, you're not allowed to make decisions on this brand until you go and travel and meet the people that are actually engaging with the product. So PMs at LinkedIn get first dibs on the OpenAI endpoints. I had the opportunity to be shipping large scale experiments to our users the March after GPT was announced.
Hey everyone, this is Jay, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Founders Podcast. I am the CEO and co-founder of a business called Casper Studios. We are an AI product studio, and I'm also your host of this podcast. Today, we are interviewing Vishal. Vishal is the CEO and co-founder of a language AI company called Verbalista. It was a really fun conversation. We spoke about his personal journey from being a brand manager for a tequila company to joining LinkedIn, how those influences ended up leading to him also starting Verbalista earlier this year. We spoke about some of the insights that he has in terms of the Latin American market, what potential US investors and professionals are maybe missing out in terms of what the opportunity looks like for startups in that market, and how Verbalista, his business and his vision, is hoping to support that market as well and help different Latin American speakers be able to get integrated more into the US economy. So excited for you to listen to this episode. Bish, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Lots of momentum here in the world of Verbalista. We're just in our first year of shipping this product. So it's a very exciting time, learning a lot, and great to kind of hear from users, especially as we shipped a few weeks ago to our first testers.
I love it. I'm excited to get into Verbalista. Before then, I want to hear a little more about you, Vish. Your career has been really cool. We met at LinkedIn. For the audience, we're both on the product kind of teams and left LinkedIn around the same time to go work on our own companies. And so it's kind of cool reconnecting and getting a catch up to see how you're doing. I had a chance then to go look at your profile a little bit more. I'm like, wow, like Bish has had a really cool career. He's like worked at Campari, like he was an account executive, he was a PM at LinkedIn, and now he's building an AI company in the language space. So he's had a very diverse kind of set of experiences. So maybe first, like give the audience like a rundown of like, how did you go from like brand management like at a liquor company to like co-founding Verbalista? Like what were like those key kind of moments in those roles that helped you get to kind of what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I have a very non-traditional background and path that got me into the world of product. Many, many years ago, I was actually a musician, and my first startup, if you will, was founding a recording studio out of my basement and recording bands in New Jersey. And that was kind of the first impetus for me to kind of realize, oh, there's something kind of nice to entrepreneurship. It scratches an itch that lets me be creative in my own way, have a little bit more control over my destiny, but also you get to kind of create something for the world that, people enjoy. And at that time, it was recording songs. So that was something that always stuck with me as I, went through college and started getting into my first jobs. And I knew I always wanted to do something in the creative space. So out of college, my first job was in advertising at a company called Mullen, and my client was JetBlue. So anything you see, hear, feel, touch, JetBlue, we were basically creating in-house media production, creative. Very interesting experience. I led their sponsorships and national billboards and so forth. So I got very in tune with print production, LEDs, how stadiums work, and so forth. But even there, I was super interested in this idea of entrepreneurship. And, one of the things they said all the time was, we want to work with the most innovative people in the world. And I went to the CEO one day and said, hey, well, if you want to work with the most innovative people in the world, those people are startups. And there's actually a lot of ad tech innovation going on. This is the early 2010s. We should be working more closely with startups and getting that innovation into the company as quickly as possible. While I was there, I actually started a co-working space for startups, specifically for ad tech companies in the Boston area. And we brought in 3 companies. We announced it at Techstars Demo Day. We branded it. We had a whole section of the office dedicated to supporting founders. Even one of our startups got like over $600,000 in revenue from clients through Mullen selling media. So that was really, really cool to kind of immerse myself into the startup world without me being the startup founder at the time, right? Like I didn't have the technical skills to kind of pull it off. I was more in the creative and production space, but wanted to find any way in to just get involved. So that was like my first kind of touch into entrepreneurship outside of kind of my basement recording studio. And, one day I got a call from a friend, a former coworker, and he said, "Hey, do you want to move to San Francisco?" But it wasn't the traditional move to San Francisco where you go into high tech and, you start building products for Google. It was actually to work at one of the most antiquated products in the world, which is liquor. And the opportunity was to be brand manager overseeing Campari's tequila and gin business for the US. So for a sense of scale, at the time, that was a $50 million business with Espolon Tequila, Cabo Wabo Tequila, and Bulldog Gin. And the brand manager's role was to take this product and grow its brand value, but as well as grow its sales nationally. Very different type of role from from being in a service industry, right, in advertising, to then being the brand manager and having your agencies to actually, disperse your budget towards. So that was very cool. It gave me like really wonderful general management skills, right? You're overseeing a whole business, right? They own the supply chain, the finances, the operations, the bottling, building the brand equity with the users, right? Every single touch point, working with sales, getting the trade marketing out there. There's so many different pieces to unpack there. And it really forces you to be like an operator, right? Except your product isn't tech, it's a physical product. It's tequila. So, when we think about that time, I really, a lot of wonderful experiences there. My manager at the time, she's Guatemalan, and she knows the US market better than Americans do. It was like so interesting to hear her perspective. And one of the things she told me was, you're not allowed to make decisions on this brand until you go and travel and meet the people that are actually engaging with the product, meet your sales reps. So I went to like deep parts of America, like middle of nowhere, Missouri, middle of nowhere, Kansas, Texas, Florida, places in the, I grew up in America my whole life, but had not been to these parts of the country and really engage with these types of users. And it forced me to build a new type of empathy for how do you ship products to people that are not you, right? And how do you make sure it really resonates well with them? So I'm super grateful for my manager to kind of force that rule on me, saying, "Hey, get out there and then come back to me with insights," because sitting in your office in San Francisco, you're never going to get the user empathy that you need.
That's super interesting. I think a lot of people have a hard time, especially in our tech circles, to really understand the user's problem if it's not their problem. Or like you hear like stories of like investors who are like, "No, like this doesn't make any sense." But it's because they're just not in a demographic. They're not like in a high socioeconomic kind of, space, and they're sitting in the Bay Area or New York, or like there's so many opportunities that exist for startups that are serving like an underserved market. And underserved could be a massive market. It's just not served. It's not the market is not the investors
Exactly.
or the company. And so what was like one of the kind of key stories or, experiences when you were going to Missouri and all these states, like learning about, the customer base? Like what do you remember any kind of like meaningful experiences there?
Yeah. So one of my products was Espolon, which was just growing like wildfire. You probably have seen it on the shelves. The other product was Cabo Wabo, which when I joined was flat to declining. And it was in the midst of kind of a product rebrand where it was founded by Sammy Hagar. It was historically the rock and roll tequila. It kind of resonated with a now aging population that are not really drinking tequila as much. And it was pretty urgent for us to come up with a different angle to still bring this kind of Americana vibe about tequila to the market, but in an angle that was more relatable than rock and roll, which, was losing its luster. So one of the hypotheses was around barbecue, right? There's a natural relationship between, entertaining your guests and, being that person behind the barbecue and, being the best, at it. And it's not cheap to do, right? Meat's not cheap. Manicuring your backyard is not cheap. Having the nice deck, the nice pool, the nice whatever, like these are not like inexpensive things, right? They represent luxury and how you, especially in the Midwest, express, your status, right? And tequila, drink pairings with barbecue is a natural fit. So we had this insight and hypothesis around barbecue, and I was exploring ways to really like accelerate that, right? How can we go really deep into the barbecue community. So I was actually going to barbecue competitions in like throughout the country, Lenexa, Kansas, the Great American Royal, competitions in Florida. We actually sponsored a brand ambassador who is the most award-winning barbecue pitmaster in the world. Like they have so many trophies, they have to like truck them out of their house to make more space. And I was trying to think about what about barbecue? What is that moment that people really resonate with? And I had a couple conversations with a few competitors in the space. And, there are two types of competitors. There's like the national award winners, right? And they do like the big four, which is like whole hog, brisket. I'm probably butchering it. I haven't done this in a long time, like chicken and one other thing, right? And there's like a big competition for that. But when you think about a barbecue competition weekend, it's multiple days, right? You bring your truck in, you get settled, and kind of the Thursday and Friday, like the Thursday's a party day, Friday's like the side events, like literally sides or, these types of things, collard greens, mac and cheese, you name it. They have these kind of alt competitions. And then Saturday's like the big event, which usually the national pitmasters tend to win, right? Like it's really hard for your kind of local person to stand out. But on the Friday, there is more of a chance for you to actually get those awards for your chili, your cornbread, whatever that might be. So they were telling us about that moment, right? When they're waiting for people to announce who won this thing. And there's that feeling of like excitement and joy. And when your name gets called, it's just like you're on top of the world. Even if it was for something, it was a side. It wasn't like some crazy thing. It was a potato salad, but there's so much joy and pride that comes with that. And so much effort you put into it. And we wanted to kind of insert ourselves into that moment. So one of the insights that we had was what if we made a competition where you were doing a food and drink pairing? And now our brand can actually be associated with that moment, right? Like when they're announcing the winner, it's the drink pairing with your food. And that drink, you try to make the best drink possible with Cabo Wabo, and you try to make the best food possible with your ingredients that you have on hand. And now you're presenting them to a judge. There's no better way to show the premium nature of a product by having a whole army of people try and make it as good as possible and then seek that joy of winning it. So we made a relationship with the Kansas City Barbecue Association. They're a nonprofit that hosts like thousands of barbecue events. And we like deployed kind of tequila kits throughout the competitions for people to compete. And so that was a really interesting way in. It gave our salespeople a new way to talk about the brand, a way to get their, retailers excited about it, get them tickets into these events and so forth. And we ended up, there was a series of things that we did. Building a brand isn't just one thing, but these types of things that we were doing consistently over time helped us turn the brand around from, declining to growing 10% year over year and being one of the highest margin products at the company.
How did you then think about the transition from, going to the Kansas City nonprofit barbecue association and like creating all these like different campaigns to be able to drive tequila sales? And how did you make that transition into tech? Like what was like the impetus? Like where do you end up landing? What in the interview when you were, at LinkedIn or, for another job, like how are you communicating to them that, this skill set actually is going to be really relevant for this next one?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it was building a product and growing a product, right? And I really, really loved taking resources, using those resources to grow, the outcome, the success of this product. And the thing with the liquor business is that I learned a lot from it, but there are a couple things that I didn't necessarily want to be doing for the rest of my life. And one of those things was it's poison. And like, I don't really want to like be selling poison to the world. Like I want to do something that's helping society. And you could argue it makes spirited connections. It helps brings people together, this and that. But like at the end of the day, it's poison. And I learned a lot from it, but I don't want to like put my life by that. Second is it moves really slow. You're basically operating on Walmart timelines, right? Which means 15-month planning cycles. You're doing 5-year planning. When we were at LinkedIn, quarterly planning even felt like a long time, right? But we're talking about huge cycles. So like anything you do in the given day to day doesn't have that like immediate impact. It's kind of wait very long periods of time for your results to manifest. And I wanted to be in something more fast paced. And so, when you think about what's more fast paced and can have a more positive impact on society, like I can do that with tech. The problem was I didn't have a technical toolkit to really defend myself as the best candidate to take on that role at a tech company. So I actually went to business school for 2 years, and I was kind of an unusual business school candidate. I went to University of Michigan, and I went there for undergrad as well, which gave me kind of a unique perspective on all of the resources available at a school. Like I went to school to be at school, and I spent a lot of time in the engineering school. I spent a lot of time prioritizing projects where I was just building anything, right? Like I learned R, I was building data models. I learned some Java. I was learning Android Studio, and I was like trying to build an Android app from scratch. I built a physical product. I was out in the wood shop. I was literally cutting wood to spec to try and get a physical product together. And I even did an independent study cross-listed between the engineering school and the art school with a professor who was an ex-Call of Duty game developer on the concept of 3D worlds. And I basically wrote this independent study saying, hey, I want to build a 3D world from scratch. Can we do that? Because the future of content is evolving towards 3D and this kind of stuff. So I was just curious, like, how is this stuff built? How do game engines work? How are people doing it today? And she looked at the syllabus that I put together and was like, you know that every section of the syllabus is a whole degree, right? I was like, that's fine. Just broad strokes. Let's just, see if we could make it. And yeah, like she sponsored my independent study, and I was out in the visualization studio, like building 3D, like building polygons, adding textures to them. I was photographing walls around campus to get textures and bring them into my world, and bring them into Unreal Engine, rig up a character, have them running around. Very, very cool experience all around to just get my toolkit around building products into place. Now, the funny thing is that you need prior product management experience to get into product management. So I still couldn't get an interview with anyone, but I did get a foot in the door with an interview in product marketing at LinkedIn for their summer internship. And that was kind of the start of getting into LinkedIn. I joined the growth team, and funny enough, I was working on new user retention, which connects back later to when I ended up making my way into product. Really wonderful experience. I had a return offer, and I graduated in COVID. Fortunately, my return offer was not rescinded, and I was able to start at LinkedIn May of 2020.
So you get into LinkedIn, you're in the product marketing role. You're like, I still want to be able to get into product. You make the transition in. I also kind of made the transition in from one division to another one that we wanted to go to, and it's not the easiest. And I'm sure there's a bunch of stories there of like how you were able to kind of navigate, build the right relationships, do it on Zoom instead of in person. But I want us to kind of like get into like, it's maybe like your last, like you do get into product, you're working in product, you're doing a really good job, but then you start to have like a little bit of an itch in terms of wanting to maybe do something different. And then which ended up leading to you leaving LinkedIn and starting a company. So walk me through the psychology of like, let's say maybe a year before you leave or like 6 months before you leave, like what are you thinking about? Why are you getting excited about maybe leaving and doing something else? What's the psychology? How are you even like tactically planning for it? Are you saving up like while you're thinking about that? Or are you like bugging your wife to be like, hey, like can you actually like get a higher paying job? I don't know. Like how did you think about it? Like walking through like the last year and then into actually starting a company. I selfishly, it's like really fun to learn about how you're thinking about it. And I think like our listeners over time will be people that are actually like founders themselves or people that are maybe thinking about starting a company. So help me understand like what the psychology was as you were thinking about this.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because I had it all planned out from the first week that I was working in product. So when I joined the product team, I had a really wonderful manager. And, before even getting into the work and what we need to be doing and the objectives, the first question he asked was like, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want out of this? And that helps me set you up with the opportunities and whatever it is that I can do as a manager to help you get there. So we did kind of like an 18-month plan, but what was more interesting was like, what is the 5-year plan? And as a product manager, I kind of very systematically, like I wrote principles for like, what do I want out of my career? And then, what are the different paths I could take? And there were kind of like 3-ish paths, right? Like one path was just continue going up the ranks at LinkedIn, and maybe you could hop around to different areas and, be a tech executive, right? And the other path is you could hop around to, go to Facebook or go to Snapchat, whatever it is, right? Like go to some other company and, play the game of working at different companies and getting that pattern recognition. And the third path was start something new, right? Like put yourself out there and do something new. And all of this was with the, thinking about like this end goal of I want to be in a place where I'm working more closely with startups, helping advise them, helping get involved in kind of that type of capacity. There's something I really loved about that when I started the co-working space and we were helping startups, get their first customers, get the ball rolling, sell inside the company where they would normally be trying to target. Now they have the foot in the door. They're literally sitting there, right? There was something I really, really loved about that experience. And I want to find a way to get back to that, right? But in order to do that type of thing, you need credibility, and you need credibility either as an executive at one of these companies or as someone who's done it yourself. And that's kind of how those paths manifested, right? So I made it pretty clear to my manager, like, I'm not trying to switch teams. Like, I like my team. I want to be here. I'm learning a lot. It's not like my eyes are looking at other companies. I'm not going to show up with a offer letter for you to match. Like, I want to learn as much as possible about building great products, being really systematic about it, having great product principles, understanding how to ship experiments, learn from our users, just build that intuition. And then I can apply that into my next phase, which could be at LinkedIn. It could be building my own product. And then there's a very, very important thing that happened, which was the shipment of GPT-4. Right. And everything kind of changed in the world of tech. I like to liken it to our generation's .com boom, right? The opportunities available in the world just exponentially appeared, and, as Bill Gates say, you can't really ignore exponential growth. And this is one of those things where the opportunities were just rampant, right? And what's cool about LinkedIn is that they're owned by Microsoft. What's cool about Microsoft is that they effectively own OpenAI. So PMs at LinkedIn get first dibs on the OpenAI endpoints. I have the opportunity to be shipping large scale experiments to our users like the March after GPT was announced, right? Like, I was one of the first PMs this at like stat sig large scale experiment level, delivering really cool results. I empowered my team to spin up their own multi-product experiments as much as possible there. Don't let any bureaucracy get in your way. Like, just ship stuff as fast as possible, because the faster you ship it, the less bureaucracy there is in place to navigate. And they did. Like, we got a patent for our work. We were creating new recommenders to provide better relevance for people who don't speak English, which kind of is a nice little tie to where we ended up going. A lot of my examples for how we showed what we were building, on the relevance side, was in the shoes of a Brazilian person who's not standardized, who doesn't speak English. And how can LinkedIn better serve these audiences with recommendations?
Oh, there's so much there. What a privilege to be working at a Microsoft company over the past few years. I think people like in a Microsoft.
It's like so fortunate.
It's insane. Yeah, and a Microsoft company, right? Like for I think sometimes people don't realize like how broad swath Microsoft and their portfolio companies, whatever, the companies that they own. LinkedIn obviously being one of them, and yeah, it was really cool. Even for myself, kind of like being like there in the early stages of this. I remember like summer 2022, like on our team, I was like the new tech kid. And so they like threw me at like, hey, go talk to this team. Like there's like this GPT-3 thing, like go check it out. What an opportunity to just be able to kind of get a little bit ahead of the curve and then start to see like what the opportunities look like in the future. Even today, like people I don't think fully grasp like how impactful this will be, how that relates to market sizes and like how, the market cap of like Microsoft or like valuations of startups. Like I don't really know how to comment on that, but the impact on people's day-to-day lives, like I still don't think people are realizing that. And it's been like almost 2 years of like, and so it's exciting. What a privilege to have worked, and I think we both experienced that, and then we both kind of, supported our growth and learning, et cetera. So it's really cool to hear. How did you then like think about maybe like tactically, like, okay, now you're getting excited. Like GPT-4 is coming out. You're launching all these features at LinkedIn. You're learning all this stuff. You're like, I could probably do this myself. I already told my manager that I want to go start a company in the future. Like, how did you actually take that step? Did you save up for like 6 months? Did you raise a little bit of capital before you left? Like, did you sell some Microsoft stock before doing so? When did you tell your team? Like walk me through those details. I'd love to learn about that.
Yeah, so I was first temperature checking some hypotheses that we had with a side project outside of work. So my co-founder and I were the original product we were building was a language learning product because it's a large language model. They're good at languages. How can we actually unpack the value that is really there? And I just got married last month in Brazil. We've been planning the wedding for like a year and a half now. So at that time, I knew that this wedding was coming up. I knew the majority of my guests don't speak English, and I was looking for a way to talk about my life to my guests, but the traditional language learning apps out there are very general and have kind of just a standard structure for you to follow. So I could do a whole course, and by the end of it, I could point to a chair and tell you it's a chair, but like that's about it, right? I couldn't talk to you about product development, about training my dog, about software engineering, like any of this stuff I couldn't really do unless I had a tutor, which I did get. I did get a tutor as well. But it was shocking to me that there's no product on the market where you could just learn vocabulary about any topic that matters to you. And that was our original version of Verbalista, was this language learning app where you can put in whatever topic you want. And then we start giving you exercises about topics you care about. And it kind of acts like Spotify for language learning, where we start giving you recommendations based on related topics. And, it becomes more engaging that way because it's relevant to your life, right? So we started building that March of last year outside of work, just kind of, doing it with whatever time we could scrape together. And we actually got it out to beta testers, but over the summer, we built like a really great feedback loop with them and got like a really nice functional product that we actually used ourselves to learn software engineering vocabulary in Portuguese and then interview our first engineering hire in Brazil. So we actually used it for a purpose ourselves, hire an engineer to help us build the product that helped us interview him.
That's awesome. That is awesome. You got to eat your own dog food.
Yeah.
So you got to actually use the product in a really interesting way.
Totally.
You're able to do that. And then you learn like all the little tidbits of things that don't work. And then you have your roadmap.
Exactly. And there was a point where we realized kind of the unit economics of it. So like a consumer app is brutal. Like language learning, you're giving someone homework. If I'm charging, let's say $5 a month, Apple's taking 25-30% of it. And then I have to spend a bunch of money on even just getting the install. By the time I get the install, I need like a pretty long retaining user to recoup the money that it took to acquire them. Retention rates are low for something that's giving you homework every day, right? So now this is where like LinkedIn PM map starts kicking in. And I'm like, okay, well, this is great if I have built-in distribution, but I don't have built-in distribution and I have to make a market under it, which is just like, even if I asked for fundraising, I'd be burning it all in marketing dollars, which is not a great use of VC money, which is where we made a pivot to where we are today, which is about, instead of teaching you a language or you having to spend a bunch of time to learn a language, what if you didn't have to? What if you could just work in English today? And we put the power of working in a second language across all the applications in your workflow. And that was kind of the point where I said, okay, this is a much bigger opportunity. I need to go work on this full time. I love my team. I love everything that I'm doing. Like, I had a very desirable job, but I just felt like if I look back 10 years from now and didn't try something in this moment where we have so much opportunity in the world, I would regret it. And so I just decided to make the leap. I gave a lot of notice to my team. So I spent a lot of time, helping with the transition, documenting everything that we were doing, even writing their next year's plan so that when I left, they weren't left with nothing. Whichever PM came through could just, they could do whatever they want with that, but at least they weren't, entering cold turkey.
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to take away like what that lesson is, right? Like you're working at a really good company, you're excited about something different. I think, the younger version of us would have just said like, fuck it, like I'm out, like here's my 2 weeks,
Yeah.
like I'm going to the moon, right? Like that's not a good way to do things. And I'd rather like be overly communicative. And again, I think this depends on the company, and like some people don't have the right culture that they can be this open, and like I'll put an asterisk behind all that kind of stuff. But generally, if you're working like at a tech company and you're young and you're interesting and you're a top performer, like I think what I'm taking away of what you did really well is you communicated your broader vision of like, I want to learn a lot here and I want to contribute a lot, and then maybe, leave in the future to go start a company. Like you were very clear in the very beginning on that. Two, you started to kind of like work on side projects first and the time that you had to be able to start experimenting and learning without just saying, you know what, like I'm out, like I'm just going to jump in. I've had friends that have done that and like, 6 months later, they still don't have any traction or whatever. I'd rather have a job while that's happening just so I can pay my bills versus feeling, anxious and nervous about being able to like, pay stuff when I'm in this startup. So you're able to kind of like experiment a little bit on the side. And then once you started to get a little bit more traction or even just like an insight, you were able to then say, this is when I want to go do it. And then you gave enough notice, you documented everything. I think I hope how you leave a company is really important.
Your last impression is your only impression.
Is your only impression. and I just wish that more people in our generation or even younger would, I mean, shit, man, I heard stories of people that were doing this, as senior directors and they would, give their 2 weeks and like go to Meta. It's like makes no sense, right? And those relationships will come back and help you in the future, right? Like your manager is awesome. Like you're interacting with like C-suite at LinkedIn on a bunch of different product initiatives. They could probably help you in the future if you build a good relationship with them too, right? So
to that point, two of my managers and my ends partner actually became investors in Verbalista, right? So LinkedIn not only helped me develop as a product manager, it's now also been a resource for me to actually get my startup going and off the ground.
I love it. We'll clip that and give it to LinkedIn so they can promote it later.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So talk to me about where you're at right now. Like what are the different, you just I saw on LinkedIn that you had just kind of sent out a beta to a set of users. Walk me through like how you got those beta users. What did you send out to them? Like what's happening at the product today? Like what are you nervous about? What's kind of keeping you up at night? Yeah. What's happening right now at the company?
Yeah. So I quit March 1st to go full time on this. And there were a couple phases to the development process, right? First was get a prototype as fast as possible so that we can raise. And then the target was let's raise a pre-seed round so that we can just accelerate development as fast as possible, which we successfully did. We got a prototype off the ground, had a demo that we could show to angel investors, raised a pre-seed round in about 3 months. So by July 1st, we had 300K committed from investors. And all around that time, we were able to build pretty good momentum where I was also accepted into the Latitude Fellowship. If you're not familiar with Latitude, they're one of the most well-respected funds in Latin America. They do a fellowship where they select 13 founders out of 100 invite-only founders. So you have to be invited to even apply. And then they are specifically focused on helping founders that are building for Latin America or from Latin America. My co-founder is Colombian, and provide them with all the resources they need to get their product off the ground and successful in a market that's not like so trivial to just ship into, it has different dynamics than the US. Language is of course another barrier there. And they've been really, really valuable in providing resources and guidance from the Latin American perspective of, our product is for Latin America and we want to make sure we're bringing our product to the market properly. So it's been a really incredible opportunity. So that's a lot of the kind of hype stuff. But what's most important is the product, right? And once we got the capital, we immediately used it to hire engineers. We've got 2 engineers in Peru, 1 in the northeast of Brazil. We brought in a legal partner. We brought in a fractional CFO to get our finances and modeling out in order. And everything's being hired out of Latin America. Like our entire team is diverse across Latin America, from our lawyers to our accountants in Panama, you name it, right? Like we are building the product with our product. And we shipped the beta to over 50 testers about a week and a half ago across Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Honduras, Peru, and count probably missing some countries. That's been the most valuable thing we could have done in this whole period of time. Like getting this thing into users' hands is so important because you're getting that direct feedback. And it's even more rewarding to see that the feedback is not about, I don't know why I have this thing. I don't get it. It's, hey, can you get this thing to start immediately when my computer starts? Because I would like it from second one, right? And those are like, that's really, really motivating. And it helps us kind of build our backlog, start shipping releases. I just posted on LinkedIn today, like my advice to any founders, like if you have a even functional prototype, just get it in people's hands as soon as possible, open space for feedback, and your users will forgive you for any imperfections because you're actually solving a job to be done for them. So it's been a really exciting time right now, like a lot of momentum. And now we're just racing to get this product into customers' hands across Windows, Mac, and Chrome by October.
So I like how you mentioned the job to be done framework. So walk me and the audience through like what's the problem that you're solving, and then like within those like what are the key like kind of jobs to be done, and what is the solution today, and then maybe like where do you want to take this in the future?
Yeah. So some context on the macro first is that there's a massive amount of investment moving from the US into Latin America. Chip production is moving to Costa Rica. Technical talent is being hired from Brazil and Argentina and Colombia, moving away from India because of time zone issues. There's, political problems going on in Ukraine, Russia area. So just all this money is moving from the United States into nearshoring talent into Latin America, which is really exciting. And you're seeing kind of like the economy start responding in Latin America. Middle classes are growing. People are getting access to more opportunities. But there's a catch. 95% of professionals, skilled professionals in Latin America, lack English proficiency. So you're kind of only limited to a talent pool of 5% who are bilingual, and those people are making 50% more income, right? So this is kind of at the core of what we're trying to solve. How do we help these 95% of professionals engage better with clients in other languages or stakeholders in other languages so that they can also have a shot in the professional opportunity, right? So what Verbalista is doing is we're making all of your business workflows bilingual. Whether you're, let's say we talked to a tour operator in Peru, and they have business across Brazil, the US, but their employees, they speak Spanish, right? They don't have a really great way to engage across languages efficiently. And they're fielding hundreds of messages a day from leads across Gmail, WhatsApp. They're using a CRM solution to manage all these messages. And they're kind of just relying on the token Brazilian person to deal with Portuguese stuff and the token X person to deal with the English stuff. And it creates a burden on the team. What Verbalista is doing is saying, all right, anywhere that you type, anywhere that you read information on any application is translatable, and it understands your business. It understands your jargon. It understands your company terminology. It understands your industry, so that when you say, let's take the Peruvian tour company ticket, right? In Portuguese, that's ingreso. In Spanish, it's like billete. But ingreso in Peru means revenue, right? These words don't exactly match when you're saying them across countries. How do we make sure that these mistakes aren't happening so that you can close business faster and more efficiently with, more effective communication? So this is kind of where we're going with this. How can you just work so totally seamlessly with someone who doesn't speak your language? And that's okay. You should be able to. There's all these companies building, AI engineers, but my point of view is, why don't you just go talk to the engineer in Latin America? They're there waiting for you, and they're probably going to be more cost effective than hiring the AI engineer.
So the UI ends up being an overlay on anything that you're on today. So the reason why you're building like the Mac and the Windows app is because it kind of like pops up like Grammarly, where it just is with you wherever you are, not just
exactly right. And there's a couple product principles in place that are helping inform how that UI works, right? So if you take Grammarly, how does it work, right? You write something and then it says, there are 5 mistakes you've made. Let's go through every single mistake you've made in the sentence. And there's a reason for that, right? Like they're a freemium model. They're trying to get you to click into it because when you click into it, there are upsells over there, right? So the priority is not to get you to communicate as fast as possible. The priority is, how do I sell you more upsells? And that affects the user experience, right? Like imagine being bilingual and then all day, every single sentence saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Let's talk about how wrong you are. Verbalista has a product principle where every action that you take should make you feel smart. So you type something, you just type something in Portuguese, hit a button, it's English, it's correct, you could hit send. So there are ways that we're learning from how our users are interacting with and hacking together the tools that are available on the market. And we're solving this need more directly, specifically for a bilingual professional. At the end of the day, something like Grammarly is for English speakers to speak better English. There's not really a product for someone who doesn't speak English to speak English today.
What is a misconception about your space and what you're learning and the intersection of AI and language that people aren't understanding today?
Yeah, the big one, which mainly comes up in the US because folks are not as exposed to like Latin American culture as directly, is that they're under the impression that Google Translate solved this problem decades ago. And Google Translate's a wonderful product, right? Like you go to another country, you need to understand what's on the menu and you kind of like scan it and you can kind of see what it is. Great. That should be available to everyone. But if you haven't noticed, that menu isn't perfect. It's enough to get the idea, but it's not like it's so correct. Now imagine applying that to every single message you're sending at work, how that makes you look, right? Like you go to Google Translate and say, what's up? And in Spanish it says, que arriba, which is like, what is literally up, And that's just like, you can't work with that. So we're putting translation in the context of professionals to help serve their jobs to be done to, look effective, be professional, express their ideas confidently and be more productive along the way.
And maybe on the AI front, like what are you learning? What are you learning in terms of like the capabilities of the models today? Like, are you using predominantly like Anthropic or GPT-4? Or are there other models that are better with language that you're learning? From my impression of a lot of the benchmarking that exists in the market today, it's relatively subjective. Meta launches a new model, then oh my god, like they beat all the benchmarks of their own.
It started about evaluations. I think everyone makes their own evaluation framework and then they overfit to their own evaluation framework and then they say theirs is the best.
It's just like, are we all
any site you go on,
like,
any product you go on, they're going to say theirs is the best and benchmark the best on their own evaluation framework. They're judging themselves,
It's like world's best pizza and like
yeah, exactly.
Like that's like the restaurant. It's so
what are you
learning? What are you learning from the AI
one
model
is
space?
We're super cost effective and we got a grant from OpenAI that we're pulling from right now. So our beta is out on an OpenAI foundation where our vision is actually to build our own small language model for machine translation so that you could just do this on your computer offline. It works anyway. For now, that's, we need to raise more money and kind of do that more effectively. But for now, yeah, we're on a foundation that uses OpenAI, but for machine translation, actually, Anthropic is way better. Like Sonnet 3.5 is just outstanding. I've been testing it in Portuguese because that's what I've been learning. I use it as my own Portuguese tutor like every day. It is like the nuance of its understanding of language and how people kind of just talk conversationally is just like orders of magnitude better than GPT 3.5, GPT-4. GPT-4o is actually not necessarily better at machine translation than GPT-4. Sonnet has really, really been impressing me recently.
I love that. Without language as a use case, we've noticed that for our own like customers at Casper as well. It's like we were like kind of hacking together like different prompts to be able to get like the right responses from OpenAI models, and then like Sonnet came out. I think Haiku was the one before then.
Yeah,
I think even that was outperforming like a lot of the GPT-4
pretty good,
models.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
But keep an eye out on Anthropic. They're onto something.
Yeah. Why do you think their models are better? Like, are they being trained on? Are they being trained on like, in your use case, are they being trained on like more like external languages? In our use case for one of our customers, they're like a book publisher. Like, are they being trained on more books? What do you have any insights on that?
It's super unclear, right? Everyone has their own systems, but it's a matter of representation of a language, right? Like how well represented is the language in your training data, right? So I had suppose that Anthropic just has better representation of Portuguese and Spanish than GPT does. And then the underlying content is not just like literature, which is not really how people talk, right? It's very formal and rigid. It may be more of these kind of conversational types of inputs, and it's observable in the results of like what Sonnet is putting out.
Do you have a call at the top of the hour?
I do, but we could continue like in 30 minutes. It's actually with an investor. That's why.
Yeah, no. We can.
But if you want to catch back up in 30 minutes, we can hop back on.
I'll have another call for then too. Let's wrap up. Vish, this was a ton of fun, man. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thanks so much for the time. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and looking forward to continue staying in touch as this journey of Verbalista continues.
Keep going, man. Keep going. I love it. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.